Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the program agenda. I'm your host, Cito Beltran, welcoming you on this cloudy, overcast morning here in Barangay Capitolio, Pasig City. Yes, medyo makulimlim po because the habagat season is still in the area, particularly in the Calabar zone. So, uulanin po kayong mga tiga Cavite, Laguna, Batangas, and of course, those of us here in Metro Manila. But don't let that ruin your day because it's the start of the week. It's a Monday, September 19, 2022, and good morning to all of you who are watching Agenda via Signal TV. Thank you to our subscribers who faithfully tune in. And of course, to all our friends abroad who try to catch Agenda via facebook.com/onenewsph and of course also on YouTube. Maraming salamat mga kabayan. And of course to all of our friends who are all over the Philippines. Okay. Let's get on with our day. And today our quotation is from Erwin Winkler. Our daily starter is from the movie producer, Erwin Winkler, producer of the film series Rocky. And it goes, our determination was triggered by their lack of enthusiasm. Okay. This statement was given by Erwin Winkler in an interview because he was recalling the story of how the underdog movie Rocky came about. As many already know, the script to Rocky was written by Sylvester Stallone, and he had offered it to so many movie producers on the condition that he would be the lead actor. And the script itself wasn't fully written when he was pitching the story. And when it got to Erwin Winkler, he was impressed by the determination of Sylvester Stallone, especially with the fact that he could actually write. Yes, Sylvester Stallone wrote the movie Rocky. He, I think, also wrote the First Blood or was very involved in the writing of First Blood, the Rambo series. And so Erwin Winkler brought the project to the studios, the big studios in Hollywood, and they kept shooting him down. And in fact, it got to the point that everybody just about said it's never going to happen. But as Erwin Winkler pointed out, our determination was triggered by their lack of enthusiasm. Now, many of you out there, especially here in the Philippines, I'm sure you're experiencing the attack of the naysayers, okay? You are constantly exposed to people who keep saying, you'll never be like that, you can't get the business off the ground, etc. Start this week. Start September 19, 2022 with that message from Erwin Winkler. Let your determination, okay, be triggered by the lack of enthusiasm of those around you. Okay, I for one have lived in a similar vein, and I have not let the naysayers put me down, and I have always pursued what I feel or what I felt God has put in my heart. So don't let the naysayers put you down. Okay, now let's go to the front page of the Philippine Star for the news collected from yesterday over the week and of course for today. The headline, BBM mulls outlawing pogos. Okay. The story is that President Bongbong Marcos is now studying the possibility of closing down or outlawing pogos in the Philippines, offshore gaming, okay, because of the so many incidents of kidnapping, prostitution, tax evasion, and illegal aliens coming in and out of the Philippines. Makes you wonder, with all of these illegal aliens and women being trafficked from Vietnam, Cambodia, etc., China, makes you wonder, nagtatrabaho pa ba ang Bureau of Immigration? Okay, at the top of the front page, we have Barangay SK Paul, postponement bill not certified as urgent. Okay, it's an indication that the bill that went through Congress may or may not live to see another day, depending on whether President Bongbong Marcos supports it or not. However, just for public information, if we postpone the barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections yet again, it will cost us an additional 10 billion pesos, because when you postpone by another year or more than a year and almost 6 months, what will happen is there will be more voters, there will be a need for more voting precincts, more voting election officials, etc., etc. So if we were to hold it this year, we will save 10 billion pesos. And for a government that keeps saying they don't have money, one would imagine that this would make sense. But apparently, the politicians, especially congressmen, don't want it to happen, because if they can postpone it by another year, many of them are almost guaranteed re-election in the next congressional election, which will happen after 2 years. Okay? Kumbaga, ganun kasimple lang yan. Moving on, the big photo at the top of the Philippine Star front page is a photo of a roadside vendor of plants selling poinsettias, which is a symbolic or a reminder to many of Christmas season for its iconic connection to Christmas in the Philippines. That's along Marcos Highway in Baguio. Okay. And then going further into the middle of the front page, you have a photo of Interior Secretary Benhar Abalos and Brigadier General Cesar Pasiwen. Kindly move down the photo, Gab. Okay. Region 3 Director. Regional Office 3 Director of the PNP, shutting down an office of Lucky South 99. Yan, isa na namang gambling o POGO or Philippine Offshore Gaming Operator being shut down for violations. And why is it that it always happens in Pampanga? Why is it that every year there is some illegal gambling violations of POGO, illegal trafficking of people in Pampanga? Naku po, gising na mga Kapampangang kaibigan natin. Monsoon to bring rains in Metro Manila and parts of Luzon. Sabi ko na po yan. And then good news for those of you who are like me, work from home employees. Although I am a talent, I am not an employee in the legal definition of terms, but work from home employees are now entitled to overtime pay according to Secretary of Labor Benny Laguesma. Okay, he announced yesterday that the department has revised implementing rules and regulations of the telecommuting law. Okay, and if you look at the story in the Philippine Star, you will find out all of the privileges due to those working from home. Okay, that's good news. Meanwhile, Maguindanao has been split into two provinces, okay? Na Maguindanao del Norte and Maguindanao del Sur, and the plebiscite, which was recently held, drew 712,857 voters out of 881,790 registered voters, which earned it the highest score in terms of turnout, okay? 80.84% relative to volume. Okay. And then France to uphold freedom of navigation over flight in the South China Sea. The French government and its local representation has made its presence and its interests and concerns in the region known, particularly in the Philippines, as it declared that it will respect and protect all rights, hindi lang sa Pilipinas, but for everyone in the region. Of course, that presentation was followed by a presentation on why we should buy French submarine. Okay, no, sorry, I'm just calling it as it is, okay? Meanwhile, that photo at the bottom, Marcos, first Southeast Asian leader to speak at the United Nations meeting, okay? President Bongbong Marcos is the first from Southeast Asia, but I believe he will be the 10th speaker at the United Nations General Assembly, where he is expected to speak on global challenges, Philippine role, rule of law, climate change, and food security. I just hope that what the president speaks of in New York at the United Nations will be aligned or will reflect what will be happening in the Philippines, because as you know, certain individuals have been challenging or questioning the International Criminal Court, its jurisdiction, its fairness, etc. So we have to be consistent with what our president says in the international forum and what we do at home, particularly with food security, because if things don't turn out right, many of you will not have a Noche Buena, you will have a Noche Malas, because predictions are we are going to have food problems or a food crisis by December. Okay. And last remaining piece of news, that photo of a child visiting, a mourner attends a commemorative memorial service for Britain's Queen Elizabeth II at the Episcopal Church of the Holy Trinity in Forbes Park. Yan po yung across the street from the Forbes Catholic Church there, or whatever it's called. And bottom to that, you have the news, only 1 in 3 10-year-olds can read simple story. The UNICEF has warned of low levels of learning, with only 1 in 3 10-year-olds globally estimated to be able to read and understand a simple written story, down from half before the onset of COVID-19. Now, please pay attention to this development, because many Filipinos and leaders and businesses think, oh, well, you know, we will just catch up, we will have face-to-face classes, etc. The reality is, okay, when one generation is marked by poor learning, delayed learning, or learning deficits, it means that many of them will never make it out of high school, will never get to into college, and will mean that we will have more laborers and less quality professionals in the country, which means poverty will remain to be the curse of the Republic because of an ignorant population. Okay, let's now go on to our interview for today, where we hope to get clarification from professors. Today, we are going to talk about what's happening in politics, etc. With, let me introduce both of them. First up, Professor Eric De Torres, Department of Political Science, University of the East. Professor De Torres, good morning to you.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir. Good morning, Sir Cito. Thank you for having me here.
Okay, good morning, Professor De Torres. And next, we have Professor Hansley Juliano, Graduate School of International Development, GSID, Nagoya University. Professor Hansley, I'm so sorry to disturb you this early. You're in Japan?
Yes po. Good morning, Sir Cito, and good morning to our audience. I've been studying po here in Japan since late 2020 actually. So I'm actually po a student right now of my university. I'm not a faculty. But yeah.
Well, but you're still an expert in all things Filipino. Ika nga, kung yung tao sa kanto may artificial intelligence tungkol sa politika natin, ikaw pa kayang professor, ano? Anyway, gentlemen, welcome to the program. I wonder if both of you have been monitoring last Friday's big story, which was all about Executive Secretary Vic Rodriguez reportedly stepping down and then also creating a new position. Well, I'll start with you, Professor Eric. Did you pick up on that story, and what's your input on it?
Yeah, definitely. One thing is for sure, something's really going on, right? And I think the matter by which how the president sees former Executive Secretary Vic Rodriguez as an still essential part of his team, considering that, despite of resigning from his post, creating another basically position that is not in accordance. And as we have noticed if the viewers picked up the news, that it was strongly being opposed by the Presidential Legal Counsel, former Senator Juan Ponce Enrile, that there would be some redundancy on the post that he actually vacated. So there's really something going on. I don't know if it is really with the mishandling, if you may, of the previous issues, specifically with the sugar importation issue, that is really the one being also pinned down and has direct accountability as compared to the four that is actually being accused of within the Department of Agriculture. So it's really something in a development, and we would later on see if there would really be an impact in terms of the way the management of the secretaries and the whole of Malacanang would look into it.
Okay, Professor Hansley, did you pick up on that story, and what's your input on the matter?
Yeah, thank you again. What's usually in my experience is that press secretaries are supposed to be the cushions of the president, especially if they are experiencing negative press. At the same time, the press secretaries, especially under previous administrations, are also expected to, I guess, last longer, unless they lose the confidence of their principal, sometimes in very public ways. The real concern here is that there hasn't exactly been anything happening out of the ordinary that Secretary Rodriguez was doing. He has demonstrated himself to be very loyal to the president when talking, when representing him. So I'm kind of also wondering if this is a function also of internal contention within the cabinet, especially since...
Yeah, because you raise an interesting point. Normally, the shock absorber should be the press secretary, which is Trixie Trixie Cruz right now, Attorney Trixie Cruz, while Vic Rodriguez, who is the executive secretary, should actually be in the backdrop, not highly visible, just attending to the business of government. But with this development, do you think that we are once again seeing power grab, the internal power grab in Malacanang?
It is not unreasonable to assume po this way because we have to remember both President Marcos and Vice President Duterte Carpio have different basically personnel. And both of them have been jockeying for positions, for influence, for perhaps access to resources within Malacanang. This is not exactly different even in previous administrations where the president and the vice president did not come from the same ticket. What is unique here is that they are in the same ticket, but they are practically internalist public, which kind of also highlighted the marriage of convenience that the ticket was last May 2022. At least that's how I see it. It really is just that. So now that they're in position, kanya-kanya na ulit.
Okay, what about you, Professor De Torres? How do you is this really a problem? Because I wrote an article in the Philippine Star that I entitled the Christopher Bongo School of Presidential Management, meaning referring to the fact that Bongo only, held or had a title presidential assistant, special assistant to the president, but he wasn't the executive secretary. But he held sway over Malacanang. Nothing got to the president unless Bongo saw it and gave it his imprimatur. Now, are official titles that important in this political ball game or power grab?
Yeah. If you notice, Sir Cito, there's really a big difference with regard to the previous administration from this administration. One is when we intend to look at basically the manner or the approach of the management. You see, the moment that when President BBM assumed office is that they automatically issued administrative order or executive order number 1. That is basically all government positions, all government officials holding specific positions to vacate, basically, right? So that was the first issuance of, it's like a clean slate. But we have to remember, during the time of the Duterte administration, there was no such issue of appointment or removal of people, diba? Doon natin makikita in Tagalog terms na yung presidente, like si President Duterte, mayor na mayor yung galawan, which means yakap lahat, hindi nagtanggal ng tao. But this time around, it's really more of the loyalty check. Now, what's the impact of that? It significantly affects the operations of the government. There are some key officials, if you notice, na hindi makagalaw or hindi makakilos kasi apektado nung inisyo nilang administrative order. So the thing is that they extended it, di ba? So it allowed you to look at, like, for example, Christopher Bongo as compared to Vic Rodriguez. The power play or the management of power within the camp is, tawid tayo lahat kahit kalaban kay Duterte, okay tayo, yakap tayo. So tumatawid yung tao kasi ganun naman yung bureaucracy sa gobyerno. Well, in fact, this time around with this administration, everything is centralized. Vic Rodriguez is the sort of, filtering this if they are within or supporting the Marcos administration, which basically disrupts the overall bureaucracy. Kasi tandaan din natin, there's really no, what do you call this, a strong, for example, or cohesive political party that somehow the Marcos administration na sinasandalan. Kasi makikita natin na talagang yon coalition, pero yung key personnel na may panggagalingan ng partido is wala talaga. So that's sort of my analysis or take with regard to that matter.
Okay, now Hansley, what about in your case? Because you're obviously a very dedicated academician, you're a scholar, but in running the Philippine government, given our reality, our third world reality, the politics of the rich reality, do these formal titles and positions really matter? Because some people have said, so what if he becomes presidential chief of staff only in paper, but in reality, if the president says no one gets to me except through the presidential chief of staff, it doesn't matter who's executive secretary. Importante ba yung office of the ES in terms of the political play? Hansley, I think you're muted.
Sorry.
Okay.
Hello. Thank you. We're dealing with the question of to what extent does the president and his cabinet respects the official structure.
Yeah.
Even previous presidents, as partisan as perhaps President Arroyo, President Aquino, even President Estrada has been, they did respect the office of the executive secretary. Of course, there are some unofficial power brokers or gatekeepers in Malacanang, but at the same time, there is precedence given to the official office, and the assumption there is you respect the rule of law insofar as you present yourself to the public, even to international organizations. The challenge, perhaps, with President Duterte and President Marcos, as their ethics said, is that their style of governance doesn't exactly hew closely to the institutions as built by the 1987 Constitution and even by presidents. Perhaps also born out of the fact na, as you mentioned, they're more clientelistic politicians by temperament. Their preference is loyalty over institutional observance. And because they have the resources and as per their election, they think they have the mandate, they think they can get away with it, that's how they will behave. Unless the people tells them na, no, this doesn't look good, you're perverting the course of governance this way. And if they hear that from their support, dun lang sila magbabago. Pero with the nature of the following of both Duterte and Marcos, we never really see that happening anyway.
Okay, now the question, Hansley, is this. Okay, we can set aside, okay, the executive secretary formalities, dyan tayo dadaan in paper. In political reality, daan kayo lahat kay Vic Rodriguez. Now, does this put an end to the squabble or the family feud of Team Unity, as I referred to it?
I don't think so. It would be extending a lot of goodwill to perhaps both President Marcos and Vice President Sara to assume na all is well even now, especially since nakikita naman natin na even VP Sara may sarili siyang takbo with how they're running the Department of Education. The main objective of VP Duterte is to build her own base and at least solidify it and expand it even more than the nominal symbolic power that Marcos has because he is the president. I think in previous years naman, there was no hiding that VP Sara is still gunning for the presidency. And nag-give way lang siya nitong 2022 in order to get the majority vote and decimate the opposition. So now, the same as previous vice presidents have been attempting, VP Binay, VP Arroyo for that matter, they're building their base as early as now. And Sara Duterte, being a well-known political operator, she knows this better than previous vice presidents.
Yeah, but she's not the only political operator in the landscape. There's also the cousin of the president and now Speaker of the House, Martin Romualdez, who has slowly clawed his way up the ladder of Philippine politics.
That is true, but at the same time, we do also have to acknowledge that even if Martin Romualdez is related to the Marcoses by virtue of Imelda, prior to Bongbong's election, he is not actively part of their family project anyway of historical revisionism and all that kind of stuff. The Romualdezes are their own political animals as well. So they are with the Marcoses now because it is politically beneficial to do so.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, they will claim it's because they're family, but it's primarily political calculus that brings them together. It is not automatic that just because the Romualdezes are related, that they will always work with the Marcoses. Of course, events can prove us wrong.
Okay, Eric, what can you add to this angle? How will this play out? Because Vic Rodriguez becomes the presidential chief of staff or gatekeeper. Do you have any idea who is the most likely to become the next executive secretary?
Well, it's actually very difficult to gauge whether or not it will really solve the problem. But for me, it really won't, because he left one particular office and created another. So that would mean more conflict and more, clash on the part of the, of the president's camp. The only consideration there is how many political capital the president will be able to consume in order for his people to readily accept Vic Rodriguez, for that matter. Now, in terms of appointment, who would be the next? I really do not have a clear idea, but there are some who is actually competent, that who can really manage and bring stability on the part of most people. There are I am sure competent individuals within his camp. Secondly, in terms of looking at such, perhaps again I would go back to the very idea of two different management styles and approach. Bongo and, for example, can be considered as the gatekeeper of former President Duterte, and now with this administration, Vic Rodriguez. They're very, very two different individuals in terms of approach, and we can see, for example, for the past 6 years that Bongo is really a soldier. Kung makikita natin that his loyalty is or also beyond reproach, but he's a soldier that his principal, the interest of the principal, and he doesn't really go on and push with any other plans without the approval of former President Duterte. But this time around, we have yet to see the extent of the style and approach of Vic Rodriguez, for that matter, because for 6 years, walang naging ganyan na issue dun sa approach ng Duterte administration. But now, wala pang 100 days, automatically meron na kaagad na ganitong pag-change ng style, pag-change ng posisyon. So, there must be really something with regard to looking at the approach of Vic Rodriguez for that.
Okay, let's go for a quick break, gentlemen. When we come back, I'd like to ask both of you to define what really is the role of the executive secretary. Can it be done by just a regular lawyer? Does he have to really be a political player? Can the executive secretary, can the presidential chief of staff, as you defined, Professor De Torres, can he carry on with the powers of the ES after he has resigned from the office of the ES? Let's go for a quick break. When we return, let's clarify all of those points here on Agenda. Welcome back to the program agenda. Thank you for staying with us or for joining us at this point of the program. And with us are Professors Eric De Torres of the Department of Political Science, University of the East, and Professor Hansley Juliano, Graduate School of International Development, Nagoya University. He is there on a scholarship. Is that correct, Hansley?
Yes, sir. I'm currently a scholarship of the under the scholarship of the MEX program, the Japanese.
Okay, well, congratulations. I know that that's a very competitive, stringent program, and it's not easy to get into, but you make us proud. And how is life for you out there?
Ano po? We're in the transition po from summer to autumn here in Japan. So thankfully, hindi na masyadong mainit.
Hindi na masyadong mainit.
Humid. Yeah, it has been very humid over the past months here. Sabi ko parang nasa Pilipinas din ako.
Well, lumamig na rin dito. Kagabi ako gininaw and my wife who is in the Netherlands, in Holland, was saying that they had to go shopping for sweaters because I think they are also transitioning to the autumn weather. Anyway, Professor Eric, what about you? Where are you right now?
Yeah, we're at home. We're on a work from home arrangement still, on an online type of approach in our university, and hopefully by next year we'll have gradually instituting a face-to-face already.
Okay. Now, I understand, Professor Hansley, at one point of the program, you might have to catch a bus. Just let me know and we will stick with you. But anyway, I'll go to you. I'll start with you, Professor Hansley Juliano. What is your description of a definition of the position of executive secretary? Is it a glorified legal office or is there more to it than we ordinary citizens know?
I wouldn't really say it's just a glorified legal office because the administrative code of the Philippines has been very explicit in making the office practically the alter ego of the office of the president. There is the assumption that the office of the president, being both head of state and head of government, they do have a lot of overlapping functions. So the executive secretary, I understand, was designed to take on the administrative or the day-to-day running of office of the president insofar as it is necessary or it is required. So the office of the executive secretary is expected to function as if it was the president speaking when they're not there. Sorry po for the popular culture reference. Pero if any of you ever watch Game of Thrones or the current prequel, House of the Dragon, you can compare this to what they call the Hand of the King. That's basically it. No?
Okay.
So,
now, yeah. What about you, Professor De Torres? What's your assessment? Because E.S. Vic Rodriguez had handed in his letter of resignation as executive secretary. And people were scratching their heads last Friday as it began to become clear that as he was going to transition from executive secretary to presidential chief of staff, he put together some piece of paper defining the powers of the presidential chief of staff, which, according to those who have seen the paper, took powers from the office of the ES and from the office of the presidential management staff and put them under the presidential chief of staff. Anong basa mo dyan? Pwede ba yun? Parang bago ka nag-resign, gumawa ka ng posisyon, tapos nag-resign ka, then kinuha mo yung posisyon, and then comes the presidential legal advisor. Teka, cannot be.
That's the irony there. He resigned, but he created another office having, as what you have said, it's sort of a hybrid between the power of the ES and the presidential management staff. So that's really ironic. And later on, mas yun nga po in the long term talaga makakaapekto in terms of stability, I think, of this administration. For me, in my assessment, it's going to be conflicting, and there will be a power struggle with regard to who will be the newly appointed executive secretary, as to how he will also manage the chief of staff of the president. And historically, when we intend to look at the executive secretary, he then, in the classical, by definition, is the alter ego of the president, right? So in terms of the decision making, as if he or she is the little president. And we also have to take into consideration that it's really more also of the office that he intends to actually, manage, and at the same time, the people, all other members of the cabinet. It's really the management. But of course, you see, the chief of staff is really sort of a creation of this administration to sort of, look at the political side or the political aspect, more of looking at it as the quote unquote, possibly the gatekeeper, if you may, aside from the executive secretary. So there will be, I think, creation of a more conflict as compared to resolving the situation as it is, because mamomroblema dyan yung ilalagay mo na executive secretary. Paano kung halimbawa taliwas yung payo o yung binibigay na point of view ng chief of staff versus dun sa executive secretary? Ganun din yung mensahe na kung saan hindi okay yung chief of staff pero okay sa executive secretary, sino ang susundin ng mga kabinete? So doon makikita natin, by creating another position would lead to more conflict, and at the same time, struggle between and among members of the cabinet and within the inner circle of the president.
Okay, so, well, those are very important points that you've raised. Now, who gets to choose, or how is the executive secretary chosen in this situation? Kasi traditionally, yung bata ng Pangulo, yung best friend ng Pangulo, or the most brilliant, competent mind, or the one he trusts the most, gets to be ES, which is what happened to past presidents and even to the current president. But do we choose executive secretaries based on merit, or is it purely confidence of the president?
Yeah, see.
Eric.
Okay. So on that note, ideally, it's really of the trust and confidence. Merit and fitness, ideally, but it's really more of the trust and confidence on the part of the president, because you'll be making important decisions, and it's not really two things. The way that you manage the country is not just about the administrative and the management aspect, but also the political aspect of it. So it builds around really on the very trust and confidence towards that person. So sino yun aside from Vic Rodriguez? Meron pa ba sa iba within the BBM camp na makikita natin na nandun yung utmost trust and confidence ng ating Pangulo aside from him? Because we also notice for a fact that for the past years, talagang ang mukha ng BBM camp was Vic Rodriguez. So we don't know kung meron pa ba na nakikita ang presidente na ibang other options to become the executive secretary, and who's willing basically to toe the line between Vic Rodriguez and
let me ask Professor Hansley Juliano. Hansley, what are your thoughts about this issue? How do we go about choosing the next executive secretary? Does he have is it better that he is apolitical, no politics, or should he be someone that has a political background? Because when Eric was talking about choosing someone, I already thought of a person, and that person will kill me when I announce his name later. But before I do that, Hansley, could you just address that? Should it be a politician, or should it be someone apolitical? Wala akong pakialam kahit sinong kampo kayo, basta isa lang amo ko, si BBM lang.
Yeah. I think it would be naive to assume or hope that an executive secretary will be apolitical, because by virtue of the fact that they're the alter ego of the president, they're required to deal both with political allies and political opponents. So the office will have to require someone not only with a legal administrative understanding of Malacanang, but also at least a capability of working with both allies and enemies. It doesn't necessarily mean na loyal laptop siya ng presidente, because ultimately certain political choices, especially in legislative agenda, will require dealing with political opponents or people from other parties. The executive secretary needs to be that person.
Okay, but does that person have to be a really competent lawyer? Because I get the impression that the executive secretary's office is a lot of paperwork, a lot of legalese, or can a politician take the position and surround himself with the best and the brightest legal minds in the country?
Yeah. I think, sure, a legal background is an advantage, especially since, you're dealing with constitutional powers anyway. But I think the main priority here is administrative competence. At least if we're going to deal with the question of coordinating policy, establishing linkages with different political parties, even international partners, you require administrative competence first and foremost. Legal competence is what the legal counsel is for.
Yeah, okay, so you need to know you need to be a lawyer, you need to be a politician, but you also need to be a manager. And but wasn't that the reason why they came up with the position of secretary to the cabinet that Carlo Nograles once held? Because the idea was he would be the one coordinating among cabinet members. Kasi parang now I appreciate that position, because executive secretary, I mean, puputi ang buhok mo dyan trying to just go through the papers, sifting through the political agendas of people.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is the function of high office, I guess. You can perhaps create additional offices to assist such officials. But as long as the laws of the land are clear that central authority when it comes to these functions are assigned in this specific office, if we respect the law, we have to focus on those specific offices. Creating new offices willy-nilly, in my perspective, is potentially perverting the rule of law.
Okay, now, Eric, what about this? What you call it? Itong special assistant to the president. Kasi meron tayong special assistant to the president, yung si Ginoong Anton Lagdameo. Is that part of the discussion, or hello, he's been a loyalist, so I give him a position? Is that one of those things, or does that come into play?
Well, going back to what Professor Hansley mentioned a while ago, in terms of also you mentioned about the position of the cabinet secretary, you have to understand that what happened in the previous administration is to decongest basically some of the functions, separating the political from that of the administrative. So nakita natin, ganun yung naging postura nung nakalipas na administrasyon. Right now, as it is, the problematic thing also is that in every administration, prerogative yan ng presidente. So ganun yung nangyari ngayon. Now, as far as the special assistant to the president is concerned as a position, well, Mr. Lagdameo can be also a viable option to become appointed as executive secretary. That would depend now on how much political capital and relationship between and among them. Again, as what I have said, sino yung mas mataas yung trust and confidence with ng Pangulo, and at the same time, I would agree kay Professor Hansley, it's administrative management, pero ang pinaka-importante kung sino yung marunong mag-navigate sa tao. Kasi yung position na yan, beyond the expertise of legal, madali yan eh. Kasi may mga appointed, may mga pwede kang staff na magsasabi sa iyo niyan. Pero ang pinaka-mahirap dyan is how will you be able to talk backdoor negotiations, discussions about what priority or what agendas that the president like. Paano ka tatawid sa mga tao na kalaban or opposition. So, yun yung profile na dapat na tinitignan ng Pangulo kung paano magna-navigate basically sa ganitong klaseng bagay. So, I think in terms of looking at such, he can consider basically the SAP, Mr. Lagdameo, in lieu of Vic Rodriguez, who can be viable.
But I don't think, I'm not sure. Although I know Anton Lagdameo personally, I don't think he's a lawyer. What about a congressman? Because if you go, Hansley, if you go by pictures, yung mga selfie, ang one person who I always see in the circle of power is Speaker of the House Martin Romualdez. Now, what would be a more preferred position? Speaker of the House or Executive Secretary closest to the President? I know Martin Romualdez will kill me when he hears about this, but it just seems to be the logical direction. What do you think, Hansley?
Thank you very much, sir. We have to deal also with the political motivations, perhaps, of Representative Romualdez. Is he the kind of person who is ambitious enough to take that position if it's offered to him? Or is he the kind of person who is perhaps content with remaining in Congress? You have to remember again.
So when you said ambitious enough, you're suggesting that the office of the executive secretary could actually be a springboard to vice president or the presidency. Am I correct?
I'm not necessarily saying political office. I'm simply talking about developing enough political clout and influence. A lot of people who want to have power and influence don't necessarily gun for being the face of political power. They're very content being behind the scenes because they know
that fits. That fits
them.
the personality of Martin Romualdez. He spends. I see you nodding your head, Eric. Could you throw in maybe your few inputs on this? We're down to our last 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think he is also a viable option considering that the way that I saw him in terms of his leadership as the majority floor leader, talagang nakita ko po personally si House Speaker Romualdez, talagang takbuhan siya kapag may problema. He can navigate. He has a very good credibility. He is actually a viable option with regard to that matter. But again, it's at the end of the day, the motivation, the extra mile, whether or not he has, he wants to ascend and look at a more a national position, if you may, to run and to gun for a senatorial position or a vice presidential position, and eventually a much higher position in office. But I think Speaker Romualdez is a viable option for that matter. And in terms of credibility, legislative agenda, okay yung profile niya. But again, that would depend on the dealings between the president and, of course, how will he be able to still handle if the position of the chief of staff is still there and Vic Rodriguez will still be there.
Okay, thank you, Professor Eric. And let's go to Hansley for the last word on the matter. Professor Hansley?
Well, I, I do look forward to additional to emerging clarity when it comes to the position of executive secretary in the coming weeks. There are so many competing phases of political access to the president. It doesn't exactly give confidence in the strength of the president. If you want a gatekeeper, you should already be there. If there are many competing access to the president, it doesn't exactly paint a good picture of how united his house, so to say, is.
Okay. Well, Professor Hansley, Juliano, thank you very much. I know it's a very awkward situation you're in. You're in a bus in Nagoya, Japan, and people there don't like you talking during the bus ride. So anyway, thank you very much. Nakakaingit ka. I hope one day we can also get to travel to Japan very soon. And Professor Eric De Torres, thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. You've both been very helpful in clarifying key points. And I hope that the Speaker of the House does not call me after this program and screams at my head. Okay. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Maraming salamat.
Okay, now let's go to our blessing for the week. And Gab, if you would, kindly put it up on the screen because I don't have my screen here. But there we go. But let him ask in faith with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. This is a reminder and our blessing because we want you to bear in mind that when you ask something from God, you must ask believing you will and have received it and thanking God in advance, okay? And I hope you have a blessed week ahead of you. Thank you for joining us and thank the Lord for giving us a good show. Please take care of yourself and keep it here on One News on Signal TV.